The clanging of iron bars echoed like thunder through the cold prison corridor. Mariam's wrists, still red from the tight handcuffs, trembled as she was shoved into a dark, foul-smelling cell. Just yesterday, she was arranging files and serving tea at the government office where she had worked for 11 years without a single warning, a single reprimand. She was the kind of woman who brought flowers for a colleague's birthday, who fasted on Mondays, who prayed quietly in the corner during her breaks. But today, she was a criminal, or so the world believed. The guards looked at her with contempt. One even whispered, "Thieves like her belong here forever." The charge? Embezzlement of 10 million rupees. Her name and face were splashed across the news, the headlines branding her as a quiet con artist hiding behind innocence. But Mariam knew the truth, and the truth burned in her like fire. She didn't steal a single rupee. The betrayal didn't come from enemies. It came from the people she shared her lunch with, the ones she called brothers and sisters. Her co-workers had framed her, and now, inside this stinking, decaying prison, she had one burning goal: to get out and to prove her innocence, even if it meant risking everything. Mariam had never been a woman of extravagance. She lived in a modest 2-room apartment with her aging mother and younger brother. Her father had died when she was 16, leaving behind debts and a promise that Mariam would look after the family. She kept that promise. Her mornings began at dawn. Her nights ended in fatigue. She worked tirelessly, skipping vacations, ignoring shopping sprees, and denying herself even small luxuries to save money for her brother's education. At work, she was the dependable one, the helper, the listener. She trusted people, maybe too much, especially Khalid, her supervisor, and Farah, her closest office friend. They'd laugh together during tea breaks, cover for each other when someone was late, and whisper secrets in the storeroom. Mariam never noticed the sideways glances they exchanged. She didn't suspect that beneath those friendly smiles hid envy and greed. Khalid had been siphoning funds through fake invoices for years. When a new auditor discovered discrepancies, panic erupted. Mariam, with her quiet presence and complete trust in Khalid, became the perfect scapegoat. They manipulated the digital records, planted forged signatures, and found the evidence in Mariam's drawer. By the time she realized what had happened, the police were at her door. The prison was a world unlike any Mariam had ever known. The food was barely edible. The air smelled of sewage and hopelessness, and the guards were cruel unless bribed. Her first night in the cell, she cried silently into the hard mattress. But Mariam was not weak. Broken, yes, but not destroyed. She began observing, listening, learning. Among the prisoners were drug addicts, murderers, and petty thieves, but also women like her, wrongfully accused, forgotten by the system, or too poor to fight back. One of them, an old woman named Shabo Appa, took a liking to Mariam. She told her, "Don't let this place rot your soul, Betty. You're still alive. That means God's not done with you." Inspired by her words, Mariam began using the prison library. She read law books, wrote letters to NGOs, and submitted petitions even when they were laughed at. Weeks turned into months, but one day a guard let slip something that sent a spark through Mariam's numb heart. "Your friend Farah got a promotion after you were locked up. Nice, huh?" That moment solidified Mariam's resolve. She wouldn't just wait for justice. She would dig it out with her bare hands if she had to. One rainy night, during a routine electricity outage, chaos erupted in the prison when 2 inmates got into a violent fight. The guards scrambled, leaving gates unattended. Amidst the distraction, Mariam did something she never thought she would. She escaped. Not to run, not to hide, but to fight. Her escape was not dramatic. She slipped out through the laundry area, covered in a soiled bedsheet, and fled into the storm. She knew the city like the back of her hand and hid in an abandoned building not far from the office she once called her second home. There, with a broken phone and old contacts, she reached out to the one man who had always admired her integrity. Mr. Bilal, the retired office clerk who had once taught her everything she knew. She appeared at his doorstep, soaked, shivering, but full of fire. Shocked but believing her, he welcomed her in. Together, they began to trace the evidence: Khalid's forged signatures, Farah's sudden bank deposits, the missing USB drives. They worked in secrecy, avoiding police raids and tip-offs, as news channels called her dangerous, unstable, possibly armed. But Mariam knew the truth was closer than it had ever been. With Bilal's help, Mariam contacted a young journalist, Sana, known for exposing corrupt officials. At first, Sana was hesitant. Mariam was a fugitive after all. But once shown the real documents, voice recordings, and even a video clip of Farah counting wads of unexplained cash, Sana's tone changed. She saw a story bigger than crime, a story of betrayal, justice, and resilience. Together, they recorded a video interview in which Mariam told her side of the story, showing documents and naming names. The video was released anonymously and went viral overnight. People were stunned. Comments poured in, some skeptical, but many supportive. Hashtags like "Find Justice for Mariam" and "Framed by Friends" trended for days. Under mounting pressure, the police had to reopen the case. A new investigation began, and this time Mariam had the public behind her. Khalid and Farah were called in for questioning. Their confident smiles began to crack as the evidence stacked up. Sana's reporting forced higher authorities to get involved. Mariam, still technically a fugitive, voluntarily walked into the police station, head held high, and said, "I'm ready to face justice. Are they?" The moment was broadcast live, and it changed everything. The courtroom was packed. On one side sat Khalid and Farah, surrounded by expensive lawyers. On the other, Mariam stood alone, until a dozen women from the prison showed up, holding signs that read, "We believe her." With Sana's reports entered as evidence and Bilal testifying on her behalf, the case began to unravel. Khalid's alibis fell apart, and Farah was caught lying under oath. Mariam's own voice shook during her testimony, but she never looked away from the judge. She spoke of her dreams, her family, the betrayal, and the night she ran, not to escape justice, but to chase it. The judge listened intently. In the final hearing, after weeks of testimony, the verdict came. Mariam is found not guilty. Charges dropped. Khalid and Farah are to be taken into custody immediately. The courtroom erupted. Mariam sank to her knees, tears pouring down her face. She had done it, not just for herself, but for every silent woman who had been crushed under the weight of false accusations. Freedom tasted different when you had bled for it. Mariam didn't return to her old job. Instead, she founded an organization called Sadakat Ki Awaz, Voice of Truth, which offered legal aid to wrongfully accused women. She was invited to speak at universities, human rights forums, and even on national television. She was no longer invisible. Her mother, who had aged 10 years in a few months, wept tears of pride. Her brother, now an engineering student, called her his hero, but Mariam never sought fame, only justice. She visited prisons regularly, offering books and legal advice to women still trapped by poverty or corruption. Her past had nearly destroyed her, but it also gave her a purpose bigger than anything she'd imagined. One day she returned to the prison not as an inmate, but as a guest speaker. The same guard who once called her a thief stood at attention. Mariam smiled at him gently and said, "The truth has a strange way of finding its way out, doesn't it?" In every speech she gave, Mariam said the same line: "Don't let the lies of others define your truth." Her story became a lesson, not just in survival, but in strength, faith, and determination. She was not a fighter by nature. She was a quiet woman who had been pushed too far. And in that pressure, like coal, she became a diamond. The people who tried to silence her gave her a louder voice. The system that tried to bury her gave her a platform. The friends who betrayed her gave her the courage to walk alone. Today, her story is taught in journalism schools, studied in law seminars, and retold in whispers by those still searching for justice. Mariam didn't just escape prison, she escaped invisibility. She escaped the life they tried to confine her to. And in doing so, she proved that even the simplest woman, when armed with truth, is powerful enough to move mountains.